Oratus, a science fiction adventure, a Skyward Saga short story, written by A.R. Knight, dedicated to Nicole. Chapter 1. Formation. She begins in luminous blue. It's wet, cool. There's electric twitches as her muscles begin to activate as the tips of her claws curl. The first breath comes filtered. Clean, ecstatic air. Life floods and flows through her. She opens first one eye, her left. White everything, a black line in the middle. Then her right. What they see is a membrane holding her massive form. The light, she realizes now, comes from the outside. Smell is only the barest tickle, and even that is purified. She moves one of her arms, of which she realizes she has 4. It snaps and crackles, shifts as molecules and muscles stretch in ways they've been designed for, and yet have not experienced. She meets resistance, the water. The name for it comes to her almost without thinking, from some reservoir of knowledge with depths she can't explore here, because the feeling consuming her growing consciousness is that she is trapped and she must get out. Fortunately, she is a weapon. Her head darts forward, her mouth full of tearing teeth. They grab hold and rip at the edge of the membrane even as her forearms and their claws shred the same. It's not thick. The skin isn't meant to hold her, at least not once she's awake. She spills out, falls from the sack onto hard-packed dirt. The sand sticks to her as she tries to stand. At first it's a wobbly affair, her legs not used to bearing her weight, her talons not used to the concept of balance. But she's being watched, so she gets herself under control. Digs those claws into the ground. Looks. The creatures watching her are not her own. They are smaller, scurrying around other sacks like the one she came out of. Brown, black, and gray fur covers their bodies in all manner of patterns. They chatter to each other in words she cannot understand. They ignore her, don't meet her eyes. They surround the sack she's just left and begin tearing the rest of it apart and carrying it into the shadows. Small halos dot the floor, which she notices come from slight holes in the cavern's rocky ceiling. The light's enough to bring her attention to another sack, one twisting and shaking like her own must have. There's a rip, a rush of fluid, and something comes out. 4 arms ending in claws, a head atop a neck, deep red scales, and a long tail. But it's legs. Unlike hers, which stand strong and firm, this new one's are twisted and shriveled, bent at wrong angles. The creature pulls itself from the sack, falls onto the floor, and struggles to right itself on its 4 arms. She takes a step towards it, a mix of curiosity and compassion pulls at her, then stops as 5 of the small creatures rush by her. They surround the struggling one, and she rises up on her legs just in time to see a bright blue flash and a sharp hiss that extends to a dying sigh. She moves fast then, following lights leading away from the sacks. She doesn't want to give those furry things a chance to evaluate her, find her wanting. Apparently, this place does not deal in mercy. A steel door slides shut behind her. She must have passed through it without noticing. As the door closes, a long, featureless hallway illuminates in soft yellow ahead. Standing in the middle of it is another thing that looks like her, bright blue-scaled and with its 4 arms crossed. She pauses, her muscles tense. Is this thing going to try and kill her?
Oratus,
The creature says, its voice a deep hiss.
you have been made. What you are, what you know has been given to you. A debt you must now repay.
It doesn't wait for a reply, but turns and strides down the hallway away from her. There's nowhere else to go, and this thing seems like it's not going to kill her, so she follows, her talons clicking soft on the dirt floor. Chapter 2. Descent. The blue one leads her to dazzling brightness. One not artificial, she notices, one that hangs high in the sky and casts an orange glow upon the deep green and pink covering. Giant arcs of glittering black rock stand over the lush gardens, sparkling and monstrous and scattered as far as she can see. Hanging from these arches are bulging rock bulbs, all suspended on large, thick cables hanging from those black arches. And then she realizes where she stands, too, is hanging. A massive boulder carved out and strung up. Summoning her voice takes effort. She calls upon an instinct within her, natural and not, to make her throat move in such a way as to create a rasping hiss that pours forth words she's only just beginning to understand and yet has always known.
Who am I?
She rasps. The blue one says nothing at first, only orients back to her. It's as a look of pride, coupled with expectation. She has come so far and has so much further to go.
Oratus, that is what you must discover.
The blue one points down and she approaches the edge and looks.
You will leap from here and find your way to that mountain's peak. Survive, and you will take the first step to learning your name and who you are meant to be.
The blue one says nothing more and only stares at her. She looks first to the mountain, off away from the glow and rising like a spearhead on the horizon. The drop is far, and deep beneath the vegetation is a darkness she cannot see. Sounds barrel up from it, a cacophony of roars and whistles, rattles and shakes. She hesitates but senses that every second she remains upon this platform is one she is judged for, that no questions will be answered here. She makes the leap. The fall is swift, and as she plummets, she sticks her 4 claws and 2 talons out in front of her, looking to grab the first thing she encounters, which happens to be a large pink flower shooting up from a thick green trunk. She strikes a soft frond that does nothing to slow her fall, but provides the barest hint of a grip. With her left foreclaw, she digs into the core of the flower and swings herself, nearly breaking her arm in the process, into the cluster of blossoms and petals, some of them as large as her. She bounces and rolls, desperately trying to keep her grasp, and she's moving, falling off the end of the petal and towards the ground. Only this time the trunk runs along her back and she's able to turn with her claws, reach out and slice through the bark. It splinters and shatters as wet green wood flies out. But she slows. Eventually she reaches the forest floor. It's a soft landing on all 6s, because, she realizes, it's not dirt or rock she's on, but a cushion of leaves and fallen petals. They litter the forest floor, covering everywhere in their fading greens and pinks except for the shoots of other plants, greens and blues mostly, trying to make their way up to the far-off sky. The air hits her next, as the vents lining her chest open up and take in a thicker scent than what blew across the hanging rock. She finds it invigorating, sharp and bright, even opens her mouth to see if she can taste it, lick up the flavor, and only gets a piece of falling flower for her efforts. Beyond the undergrowth, however, the forest is crowded and dark. Orange light beams down at random, and the shafts move with the breeze above, so that she feels as though she's fallen into some mystic riddle. A place not too unlike the membrane that gave her life, except here, if she's careless, the forest might take hers. So she's ready when there's a rustle, then a sudden thrash behind her. Swinging her tail, she uses the momentum to twist on her talons, bringing up her foreclaws towards the approaching noise. A gray-scaled creature, similar to the blue one above, and, she believes to herself, tears through a sprawling fern and rolls by her. Her eyes follow it, catching the glistening red of fresh wounds sprinkled across its back. The creature settles on the ground, unmoving. But the thrashing isn't done. A moment later, following its prey, a bronze-scaled Oratus, larger than her, blue and gray, strides into the small copse where she fell. Like gray, bronze shows signs of fighting, though by the size of the cuts it's obvious who's winning the struggle. Bronze stops as he catches sight of her. She can tell his sex from the way Bronze smells, a pheromone hovering on the edge of her senses.
Another one?
Bronze says. Then he seems to remember a plan, clasps his strong forearms in front of himself and nods towards Gray.
Welcome to our momentary world. I march towards the mountain.
And him?
She points to Gray.
One whose journey is over.
Bronze spares Gray a glance. It's not a merciful one.
He protested my leadership. He failed.
She watches as Bronze moves to stand over Gray. Bronze raises a claw, looks back towards her and opens his mouth as if to say something when Gray bursts from the ground. With 2, then 4 claws, Gray scales Bronze as the latter hisses, flails, and misses as Gray leaps from Bronze's shoulders. As Gray flies, his tail snakes around Bronze's neck, circling tight and with Gray's momentum pulling it forward, drags Bronze over and slams the creature onto his back. Loosening his tail, Gray wheels around, raises a talon and hovers it above Bronze's head. She cannot deny the thrill rising in her, the power pulsing in her veins at the fight, the primal urge to join in and tear with her teeth, her claws. It doesn't even matter who, just that she is a part of the carnage, and she cannot resist. This is her calling, what she lives for. Her jump carries her into Gray, knocking him away from Bronze. Gray, though, uses her own momentum against her and rolling with his talons pushing against her own kicks her off so that she flies on into the forest, bounces off one of the trunks and lands on the plant floor. The shock jars her mind, clears the rage, though it lingers and she feels she can reach out, grab and wrap herself in its fiery cloak. A pair of hissing roars snap her eyes up to see Bronze and Gray circling each other, eyes locked and claws sharp. They are so like blue, like her. She leaps in between the 2 monsters, hissing as she does so. Both Bronze and Gray dart back, avoiding what both must think is an attack aimed at themselves. She winds up alone with plenty of space to circle and stare at the other two as they stare at her.
Do you go to the mountain?
She asks, turning her head from one to the other as she states the question.
I do.
Bronze says, and she sees confusion in his eyes.
I told you that a moment ago.
I do, but not with that one. Gray hisses. If I wish to die, I'll do so on my own terms. The two burst into another fight, though this one at least is waged with words. Insults and accusations fly too fast for her to catch, with names of places and strange things tickling her mind but being interrupted before clarity can struggle through. What's clear, though, is that both of them have been down here longer than she has. A deficit of knowledge she must correct if she's going to survive long enough to make the mountain. So she roars again, this time louder, more confident. A guise, and one that works. Again, Gray and Bronze stop and stare at her.
I come from above,
She admits.
and I do not know where I am.
A risk, but she hopes they forget their feud to focus on her. Even if they tear each other to shreds in another moment, she wants to learn what she's able to first. Get what she can from these two so much like her before they vanish, either into the forest or the cold whisper of death. You came from the last arch? Gray asks, looking up towards the canopy. Bronze says nothing, and by his questioning eyes, he's as interested in the answer as Gray. A blue one of us told me to leap. I landed here.
Then you are the missing piece.
Bronze says.
The third one to our trio.
Our trio. I'm not going with you.
No choice.
Bronze says the words as if describing stone.
3 arches, one of us from each. That is the design.
She doesn't understand what Bronze is talking about, but Gray's anger seems to dissipate at the words. He looks at the shredded scales on his skin, at the crimson blood seeping from them towards the floor, and closes his eyes. She looks over to Bronze, who, sporting his own scratches, stares hard back at her.
What design?
I'm from the first arch.
Bronze replies as if that says everything. She cocks her head so he knows that's not the case. Bronze takes a breath, his chest swelling with the intake.
This one is from the second, and you are from the third. The 3 of us are meant to join together, as it takes 3 to complete the mountain.
Why should I listen to you?
She asks. Distrust trickles through her senses, her instincts warning her that the wrong allies can be just as fatal as enemies. You shouldn't, Gray hisses from behind her. He wants your help for his own ends. Bronze hisses, glares at Gray.
This one would go alone. Would abandon you in a moment if he thought it would help him. You need companions, Pink. You must have help or you will die out here.
Bronze casts his claws wide, calling her attention to the noise coming from the jungle around. All those unknowns lurking in the shadows behind the trees and thick blue and purple leaves, floral smells mingling with an undercurrent of rot and fresher kills. Bronze likely isn't wrong. This is a place full of predators, and a loner makes for easier prey. Survival isn't something she needs to learn.
I'll go with you.
She says, and Bronze nods as if he had expected no less. A mistake, Gray hisses. But he's right about one thing. You'll die alone in this place. You have your trio, Bronze. Now Bronze bursts into a toothy grin.
Then we have nothing more to wait for. Assuming you're not hurt too badly, let's go.
As if he could hurt me. Gray rasps softly behind her. She thinks about pointing out the wounds, the bloody scratches, but stays quiet. Even now, only a short time after hatching, she already knows what buttons to press and what to leave alone. Chapter 3. Past Acts. Bronze chatters endlessly as they climb between trees and branches, over small ponds and wading through a rushing river. She is thankful for her talons and the way they cut footholds in the rocky floor. They brush aside ferns and endless amounts of small pestering insects intent on clogging up her breathing vents. Yet always Bronze talks, and because the only alternatives are the jungle noises, which quickly blend into an indistinguishable miasma, she listens. Bronze lays out a parade of theories, guesses and questions about what might happen on the top of the mountain, what lies beyond the sky above, because they, Bronze asserts, did not all come from here. He wonders if this is all a game, if there are people deriving entertainment from their struggle, or if this is some sort of strange military exercise. When Bronze asserts that the whole thing might be an illusion, a mental trick, she can take it no longer.
Bronze, what are you talking about? I hatched and a blue one shoved me off a cliff and into the forest. He told me nothing,
she says as she steps over a wide, triangular purple leaf. Bronze holds up his left midclaw, points to a green ring around his forearm that she has up to this point assumed was a piece of jungle plant or maybe a scar.
This tells me. It whispers in my mind, answers every question. I've barely begun to dig through what it holds.
Bronze seems to lose track of reality even as he says this.
It's like an ocean, one I can keep swimming forever.
Tell her where you found it, Gray says. Bronze looks away, off towards some distant forest point, as if by not meeting her eyes he won't have to face the horror of what he's about to say.
I took it. The owner didn't need it anymore.
And tell her why. Tell her why the owner was so free to give up this holder of all knowledge. Bronze ignores him.
We need to keep moving. If we don't find a tall group of trees to camp in before nightfall, it will be treacherous.
This is a sloppy evasion, and one she catches easily. Yet Bronze is larger than her, and with Gray wounded, conflict doesn't seem like the best course of action. Not here, not when the likely result is a fight and then being either dead or down one or more of their small team. When I hatched, only one thing in my arch wore one of those, watched me get up, scattered a bunch of those furry things. Then she took me right to the edge, told me to find my name. Gray is saying the words and she's catching tone. He's leading on to something. And you know what I didn't do? I didn't slaughter her.
Neither did I.
Bronze stops as he speaks.
It was a struggle. He thought I wasn't fit for it. He thought wrong. I did nothing more than claim what I earned.
She moves between the two, slaps her tail against the ground. It's a wet thwack, the force of her muscles pressing plants, scattering dirt, crushing bugs, but it gets their attention.
I don't care. I don't know where I am. I don't know who either of you are. And I don't trust you, but I need you. Whatever you both did before you got here doesn't matter. What does is getting to the top of that mountain.
Gray hesitates a second, then lowers his claws. Fine, until we get to the top.
I'll be ready,
Bronze replies. Then he turns and points high up where several trees are bunched, their green, scaly branches all looping together in a sprawling, tangled knot.
That's where we'll spend the night.
Not that she plans on sleeping. Chapter 4. Night Watch. With 4 claws and talons, the climb up to the tangled, woody mess takes little time, and it's a big enough space that Bronze and Gray find their sides and stake their territory with glares and quiet, simmering eyes. She has no time for this. And anyway, it's her first night in the forest. Not something she wants to waste with a pair of brooding fighters. Thankfully, it's not hard to find where she can go. Up. The trees continue above, stretching towards the canopy before exploding into the wide purple and pink flowers she saw from the arch. That she fell into. Now she climbs to them, and it's a softness that her claws bite into when she gets there. Tearing through the bright color almost feels wrong. But the sky, now that she can see it clear, pulls her further until she's above. That's the only word that can describe what she's looking at. A world spread out before her. One that she saw from the arch, yes, but that's when everything was new. Now she knows it, understands what she's seeing, the sound she's hearing, and the smooth smothering of floral scent that flows into her vents with every breath. In one direction, striking against the burnt orange sky as twilight takes its due on the day, are the black arches. Definitely 3. And they're much farther away than she would have expected. Bronze had kept them moving, and she supposes it's a good thing because the sooner they get to that mountain, the sooner she can get rid of them. As she watches, the arches seem to glow. Only for a second, though, and then the lights refocus into tiny points along the arches, like glittering blankets. She wonders what Blue is doing, whether he's pushing another hatchling off the edge, or if, like her, he's looking across the jungle treetops and wondering about the world beyond. The thought turns her the other way, towards the mountain that occupied a sharp triangle on the horizon when she left the arch, but that now dominates more than half of it. The mountain isn't quite the perfect shape she thought it was from afar. It's lopsided to the right, and the sides are jagged in parts and curved in others. Shaped by nature, and not by more purposed hands. She glances at her own claws, shadowy themselves in the last gasps of light. Razor sharp, but there are nicks. Chips here and there from rocks or deep cuts during the run. The imperfections are calming. Maybe she's natural too. A trilling cry starts and stops quick above her, and when she looks up and catches, for an instant, the black line with wide wings that made it, she as quickly forgets it in favor of what dominates her view. The daylight is gone, and in its absence the stars have come out to play. She doesn't know what they are, these bright sparkles flaring. There are countless numbers of them, some in clusters and others spread alone, as if choosing to walk their own paths. Patches of the dark shift in color, with bluish-white slashes cutting behind as if a shallow scar has been cut through the universe. In an instant she is made small, a tiny nothing against the vastness of the cosmos, and for a moment the wonder she's feeling threatens to slide into panic. Instinct helps her here. She's a hunter, a survivor, built for murderous, efficient purpose, and she knows that what she doesn't know is the greatest threat to her existence. She has to fill the gaps, understand what she's seeing, know what to avoid, to find, to use, and if necessary, to kill. That thought slips her towards Bronze and what he's wearing on his wrist. Bronze said knowledge lived inside it. A vast amount. Enough maybe to tell her what's going on up there. She descends face first, looking for any sign her two companions might have murdered each other while she was stargazing. No blood greets her return to the tangle, only a pair of sleeping. And that's when she realizes she doesn't even know what they are. What she is. Words and names have come flitting through from somewhere, telling her to call these things trees, to call those lights in the sky stars. But there's holes. There's nobody to answer the why. But there's something that might. She takes a cautious step towards Bronze, her talons resting on their points, keeping things quiet. Even so, she figures the noise of the night, the hoots and howls of things on the prowl and the panicked cries of their prey, would cover anything she does. Another step, keeping her tail off the ground, her mid-claws spread, ready to reach down and slip that emerald bracelet off of Bronze's wrist.
You can't have it.
Brown says as she starts to reach towards him without opening his eyes.
This belongs to me now. It's mine, forever.
You took it from its owner.
She replies, covering the shock and frustration with a question.
I only want to look, to ask questions.
If you're lucky, someday you might find your own. Now sleep. Got a long way to go tomorrow.
And just like that, her questions remain unanswered. She gets another first. Failure. The feeling saps her enthusiasm, lets the day's efforts in, and she slumps back to her own side of the platform, curls up, resting her head on her tail. Sleep comes cloaked in mysteries and whisks her away. Chapter 5. A Hunt. When Gray announces he's hunting for breakfast, she says she's going with him. Gray doesn't answer, just leaps from the branches towards the forest floor, though when she follows, Gray greets her landing with a steely stare. I'm not doing this for fun, Gray says. I'm doing this for food. I don't want to take care of you.
We're supposed to work together to survive, right? If I'm no good at this, how can I help you?
She's hoping the logic might drive a wedge in Gray's attitude, but he just shakes his head. If I need your help, I'm already lost. But Gray doesn't object when she follows him. When he bursts into a fast run, she does too. Her talons catch deep into the dirt and propel her along, diving after Gray between the trunks and dodging vines as they move, until suddenly Gray stops. We'll never catch anything with you making all that noise. Don't move. Watch. She looks as Gray starts to bound. She notices something. His claws, rather than dig into the ground, ripping and tearing, land lightly, as if the tips of the claws themselves are the only things that hit the earth before Gray springs up again. When he passes by tree trunks, as he goes in a large circle around her, his foreclaws reach out and gently guide him from one tree to the next. His tail, rather than dragging on the ground like her own, stays rigid behind them. It swings through the air without a sound, providing balance.
You're quiet.
She says when Gray stops back in front of her. It's called hunting.
Let me try.
She says, and doesn't wait for an answer. It's hard. She has to measure her weight, has to battle her own balance and lean forward into her momentum. She keeps her claws and tries to only extend them when she's making a sharp turn or needs to steer herself through close bunch of trees. These things come quick, but the tail is the hardest part. It wants to sink down. It's heavy and not used to being taut. This will, she realizes, take time. But it's a start. When she circles back around, Gray doesn't wait for her to settle, but breaks off. She recognizes the chase for what it is and keeps after him, though now she's hearing the rushing air as they move, the startled cries of creatures caught underfoot, and the gurgle of flowing liquid which grows into a roar. Until stopping himself hard against a knot of trees, Gray stays still. She's going fast too, and the sudden halt isn't something she's ready for, so she digs her talons in deep. Her head jerks forward and she's about to pitch past Gray into the ground when his tail whips out in front of her like a bar and keeps her steady. Water source. Gray hisses, and she has to strain to hear him over the churning rush just beyond. Stay quiet. As if he has to tell her that. Gray nods one way, then points at her in the opposite. The meaning's not hard to parse, and so one talon at a time, her fore and mid-claws out and ready, she circles left. The brush here is thicker, the constant water giving them plenty to grow on, and it's hard to move without pushing aside wide leaves and thick stalks. In between the green and purple vegetation, though, she catches glimpses of the swirling rapids beyond and the pool into which they pour. As bodies of water go, her limited experience makes this the largest one she's ever seen. The pool is larger than the branch nest they slept in the night before, wider than the groves they've come across, and its deep sapphire color stands in contrast to the brighter pinks and greens of the flowers above and ferns nearby. She briefly considers the pool as a source of peace, rest even, but instinct smothers that feeling quick as she catches sight of the pool's already present members. There's a pair, and she realizes why it took a moment to pick them out of the foliage, because they are like what surrounds her. Like large rocks, only coated in hundreds of slippery emerald vines that sink down and pool on the ground around them. Though with a decided majority angling towards and dipping into the pool, the creatures seem to be resting. The only sign that they're not the very plants they imitate comes from small clouds of yellowish dust that puffs from the tops of their sloping bodies every few seconds. The dust falls back down on the creatures, and when it coats the vines, they glisten.
Do you know what they are?
She hisses softly at Gray. No, but they taste good. Her confused face asks the question. Bronze taught me what I taught you 3 nights ago. Gray admits, and by the huffing of his vents, it's clear he's not thrilled about it. I think he's been running around here longer than he admits. Told me that I'd need to know how to catch my own food. But after our first day moving, I didn't have the energy. So he had me watch.
Watch what?
This. Gray slithers by her, moving quick and soft along the wet bank towards the 2 creatures. They don't move, don't even react to Gray's presence as he closes in on them. She focuses, waits for the creatures to run or maybe attack, but they don't. Gray gets real close, stands over the nearest one, then turns back to her. Even from here she can see the sad glint in his eyes, the lost chance at a thrill. Then he turns back, opens his mouth, and the claws begin to tear. Chapter 6. Raging Storm. No natural predators, that's what Bronze says when they get back to the nest. The creatures, which Bronze claims are mossics, are delicious, juicy and tangy, and she eats more than she thinks she can. Apparently running through the jungle gives her an appetite. Bronze partakes too, and though he did none of the work, he eats the largest portion, even ushers the 2 of them to eat faster. She waits for Gray to protest, but the hunter says nothing, barely speaks during the meal.
Is it hunting if the prey doesn't run?
She asks Bronze, mostly because Gray had seemed so excited, and now no trace of that murderous gleam could be found. Bronze holds up his left foreclaw, the one with the bracelet.
You find it, kill it, eat it. That's a hunt according to this.
Then that makes you a hunter.
She says to Gray, who pauses for a second and glares at her.
She's right, little one.
Bronze is grinning too wide while he says this. It twists the nickname into an insult, and when Gray bares his own teeth back, she tenses.
There's not much I've found that'll give us a chance to really test our skills. Best be happy with this, at least till we get to the mountain.
And when will that be? Bronze looks towards the mountain, though it's almost impossible to see through the thick brush. Turns back to Gray and turns all 4 of his open claws up. Gray huffs at the gesture, then goes back to the meat. As if answering instead of Bronze, a snap-crack wind gusts through the grove they've claimed, and she looks up to see pure white bolts splitting a darkening sky. Just because everything she can see is a swirling mix of rain and falling foliage doesn't mean they don't run. If anything, she thinks Bronze is moving faster today than before. Their leader is leaping high over muddy pits and using his claws to tear apart brush in front of him rather than avoid it. At first, Bronze's change in tactics are a curiosity. Soon she gets worried.
What are you doing?
She asks during one of the rare moments they pause to catch their breath. The forest, though it must be the middle of the day, is almost pitch dark around them. The trunks press in close, and even though she thinks she's the deadliest thing in this forest, a fear she might be proved wrong shivers with the cool storm wind. Bronze, though, doesn't answer her question. He gives her a wide-eyed look, then bounds on, his talons tearing up chunks of mud that splatter the trees.
He's afraid,
she says to Gray, who's staying back with her. Of what? Gray's as confused as she is, which makes her feel better. Though maybe it shouldn't, as Bronze is getting ahead now. She bursts after him and hears Gray hissing curses behind her. How does she know they're curses? only because the words trigger some deep twitch in her, a recognition that such things should be said in the most desperate of times. She risks a glance back to confirm that Gray is not, in fact, in such dire straits, but instead of his flashing form, she only sees black jungle. No sign of him, no sound either. She's kept her legs pumping through the trail of Bronze's wreckage out of instinct, but now she falters. Bronze isn't getting closer anyway, and it's either wait for Gray or continue on alone. Wait for Gray. That assumes he's coming. She looks around her and notices that the trees are thinned, the forest gradually breaking up into grassier land, lit up in blinks from overhead. She opens her mouth, catches some of the rainwater and embraces the ice-cold rivulets running down her throat. Her vents lacing her chest inhale the fresh scent of nourishing growth, and the rank stink of fear. It's coming from her right, back towards the thicker forest. She can't see past the ferns bleeding into the grasses, but there's something back there. It might be Gray, or it might be prey. Either way, Bronze is gone and there's nowhere else to go. So she raises her tail, treads lightly and lopes towards the smell. Goes around the first batch of trees, blinks away the raindrops and hears something beyond the sounds of the storm. Growls, ones she knows, and they're being answered by whistling hums and wet thwacks. She slides her head around a trunk, and in the next flash of lightning sees Gray flying through the air, but he's facing the wrong direction. By the time she forms the word how, Gray collides with a tree and falls to the ground. She looks back the way he flew, and there, crashing through the brush, is a whirling wall of vines writhing and stretching towards Gray's limp form. There's a click of recognition. The thing's a Mossex, only one far larger than the pair they'd eaten at the start of the day. And unlike the two docile ones, this Mossex is moving with a vicious speed, and its vines slice through the air towards Gray. Indecision strikes for a second. She's safe behind the tree, and the Mossex doesn't look like it's noticed her. She could run, pick up Bronze's trail, and probably catch up to him sometime later. At the very least, this thing wouldn't eat her. In that hesitation, the Mossex's emerald tendrils reach Gray, wrapping around his claws and legs, lifting him from the ground. Lightning lit, the Mossex lumbers closer, and she sees the horde of vines encircling its front peel away, like water from the head of a fountain, and beneath their cover spins a rocky maw. The Mossex's teeth, unlike her own, are black and crumbled, stumps jutting forth from a dirt-ridden wreck of something that may have, in some distant past, been flesh. She has no doubt those stumps are going to tear Gray to pieces, would tear her to pieces too. Gray's eyes snap open as the vines pick him up. He struggles, but the vines have him taut. Those claws, wet and ready in the rain, can't move. He tries to lash his tail and it bounces off his living manacles, which leaves Gray with one option, his own mouth. His teeth are razors and they act as such. Gray's neck is long enough to get him within snapping distance of the vines holding his foreclaws, and with a couple of quick tearing bites he gets part of himself back. That's all she needs to see. Gray's fighting, and she's not going to stand here anymore and let him die. The Mossex sends another batch of green forth, a twisting onslaught of leafy doom, but before it reaches Gray, she leaps in between, her 4 claws, 2 talons, and 1 mouth enacting a visceral demolition that covers her in sticky plant juice, her scales sporting a borrowed emerald skin. Without really trying, she's managed to cut Gray free. A fact becomes readily apparent when her friend, the term slides through without her stopping it, jumps past her straight at the Mossex's still-churning grinder. Gray, though, times his leap right and jumps up and over the rocky teeth, landing instead in another nest of vines. Here, though, the length of those tendrils works against them, as by the time those long green hairs manage to orient to Gray's position, he's cutting them down by the forestful. Whether through panic or anger, the Mossex rears up, its root-like legs visible now that their vine cover is gone, and she sees the mottled pink underbelly of the creature, where, just hours ago, she's carved herself breakfast. This one makes for a big target, and it's not one she's going to miss. She takes a quick 2-talon step, then leaps into a 4-claw grip on the beast's underside, setting to work like Gray taught her, with reckless abandon. This works for all of a second before the Mossex calibrates to its precarious position and plunges its front back down. She doesn't know if Gray's still on its back, but she's coming real close to the ground. The Mossex's front legs hit with a bone-rattling shake, and now she's tearing not to kill the thing but to survive. Either she gets through, or the Mossex, sinking lower into the ground, is going to crush her into nothing. Her tail feels the pressure first, the unrelenting solid earth. This certain death drives her into a frenzy, a red-hued state of sheer twitching muscle and frothing anger that sends all of her pushing, raging towards her own survival. Chapter 7. To the Mountain. Daylight came back in strips and slashes, a dull gray glow filtering through the greasy wet coating her eyes, her scales, her everything, except her vents which gulp in the bits of fresh air that flow through the offal to her, and this gives her strength to move again. This hurts, and there's snaps and creaks as her bones and muscles realize that they're not quite dead yet, but they're awfully close.
Are you alive?
A voice she doesn't expect, but after a second's hesitation, welcomes.
Bronze.
She hisses.
Here, underneath.
That's all she has the air for, but that's all she needs to say. The tearing intensifies, and soon she's seeing 8 sets of claws ripping away the dead Mossix's remains. It feels similar to breaking out of the sack, like being born, only this time she emerges barely alive instead of fresh and ready. Gray has to help her stand in the middle of the great beast. The storm, having decided to plague other parts of the planet, leaves a glistening sheen on everything which in the afternoon light makes the forest appear golden. Mist rising from the ground as it warms back up, and where the fog catches the light, haphazard rainbows form. It would be enchanting if she had the mind for such things. As it is, though, she's twitching her claws, her talons, her tail. Some are chipped, all are sore, but being pressed flat against the ground hasn't ruined her. Gray notices her examination and offers up a light hiss. You didn't need to come back for me.
I know, I did it because we need you.
She says this last part loud enough for Bronze to catch. The big Oratus is prowling around the edges of the Mossix, occasionally snapping bits of thick hide and sticking it into his mouth, foraging their kill. He ignores her, which sparks a snarling fire in her gut.
Why did you run?
She lurches towards Bronze, though whatever intimidation she's going for stumbles along with her left leg and Gray has to catch her. Still, her vents work, her mouth moves, so she keeps going.
You didn't even turn back, not once.
I'm here, so clearly I came back.
Bronze replies, tearing at another scrap of flesh.
I knew we were being pursued and expected you both to keep up with me.
You ran.
Now Bronze looks back at her, and she sees the same dangerous glint Bronze had when she first met him fighting Gray. The Oratus has pride, and she's able to wound it. As she's considering this, she feels a tap on her tail. Gray. She catches him in her left eye and sees caution on those scratched, cracked scales. Neither of them are up for another fight. Coward or no, Bronze could tear them apart if he wishes.
I scouted ahead. Not my fault you're not as fast.
Bronze replies, but leaves the end of the sentence hanging, an opening for her to cut in a reply, to swing the argument over the edge. She closes her eyes for a moment. Those flaring coals inside her still want to push forward. Consequences be damned, but no. It's not her right to push Gray into this, and there's a kernel of very real, very sharp fear deep inside. She's not ready to die yet, not after she's just come back. So she allows her vents to breathe out her own anger.
Just next time, wait.
A peace offering keeps her pride and his intact.
I will.
Bronze accepts the exchange. They relax, and the immediate hazard of the moment passing, the three of them set gorging themselves on the feast they've made for themselves.
How did you know?
She asks Bronze as they finish.
You were running differently before it attacked.
This.
Bronze again shows his bracelet.
After we ate the small ones, I searched for them. Found that they tend to travel in groups with larger ones protecting, avenging their young. And if you had listened beyond the thunder, you would have heard it coming.
So you knew and didn't tell us? Gray counters, getting a bit of fire back. For the first time, Bronze falters. His mouth hangs there. His vents suck in some air, but no words come out. Until he glances towards the bracelet again.
This thing is hard to describe. It's like a fog that covers your mind. Once I'd found what was after us, I kept digging, trying to learn how to get away, what it would do if it caught us. And I started to run. I only realized you weren't with me when the storm broke away.
She's thinking that perhaps Bronze couldn't be trusted with the bracelet if he can't keep himself under control. But before she can put that thought to words, Bronze turns his back to them and gestures onward. Says they ought to get moving if they want to make some progress before real nightfall comes again. She stores the thought for later, but she's going to take a second look at everything Bronze does from now on. The going is slow now, what with her and Gray shambling rather than loping along. Every step sends twinges from myriad places racing up and down her nerves. Tiny aftershocks from the quake her body endured. As the anger at Bronze fizzles away, the adrenaline goes with it, leaving her struggling to keep going as the daylight shifts more and more towards that purple-orange pastel. At least the scenery changes here at the edge of the jungle. The ferns make a gradual shift to long, wavy grass as the covering trees add spacing and then vanish entirely. She sees why. Behind them, the jungle's wide valley is visible, but here the plateaus slant down into a wide plain. The wind is picking up, blowing cool air against her scales. Fluttering insects hop from stalk to stalk, while darting leather-winged creatures snatch others for dinner. Batches of woolly pink seedlings drift along the air, and she sets her foreclaws to the task of keeping her eyes and vents clear. The mountain juts up without interference in front of them. The plain doesn't go far before rising to its foothills. And then the peak, now obscured by some remaining storm clouds. They're close. Up there on that gray monolith waits her name, and she's going to get it. Chapter 8. The Last Trial. They spend the night around a pool of muddy water. It's not elevated, but the grass is tall enough to provide some cover, and Bronze, checking his bracelet, doesn't think there's many predators out here. At least none that would tangle with 3 Oratus. She's grateful for the rest, and when dawn comes, she's reluctant to move, until she sees Gray pointing to the distance, towards the mountain. Today, Gray hisses. Today we make it up to the top. Today we earn our names.
Do you think it'll be that easy? The climb, then we're done.
Gray doesn't have an answer. She doesn't press him. They're still sore, hungry, and she doesn't care to start an argument. But she keeps an eye turned up there, to the peak touching the cloudless sky, as she stretches out. Bronze declares it's time to go, and with nothing to pack up, they leave. Without the snarl of trees and ferns, the run goes easy, and hours pass as they roll through the plain and up into the foothills, up to where the grass gets shorter and the ground rockier, where the purple flowers and white-tipped stalks give way to a darker scale. The bugs and leather-winged things disappear. They keep going, their destination too close to stop now. She feels the mountain looming, its bulk curling towards her every so slightly so that it seems as if the peak is directly overhead. It's what she's staring at when her talons hit something that's not ground, something hard that shrieks an unnatural sound as her right talon slides along it. The noise makes her look down in the dirt at the slab of faded yellow metal that she's landed on. The rocky black dirt is busy reclaiming the thing, but the corner she struck is still making a play for the air. The tip is oranged over with rust, and there are charred streaks mingling with the yellow paint.
Where do you think that came from?
She asks Gray and Bronze.
I would talk with the bracelet, but I don't know what to ask.
He's unsettled, tense at the sudden twist to their plans. She wonders if he'll run again, like with the Mossuks. She looks at Gray and pauses. There's something moving up his back, a bright blue circle crawling up his spine, traveling towards the back of his head. Gray, though, has his eyes on the metal plate as if he recognizes it. She can't ignore the circle, though.
Gray.
She starts as the circle centers on the back of Gray's head. Let's see what's beneath, Gray says and lurches forward towards her, crouching towards the plate. In the same instant, there's a high-pressure whine and a brief flash. The ground behind Gray glows hot white before the rocks themselves melt into sludge. There's no hesitation. All 3 of them scatter. Instincts take hold, call for her to take cover, to find somewhere to hide. Except the only thing here are slate rocks and cliff edges, a steep slope and nothing more. The sparse cover goes for the shooters, and she sees them now. They've crept around the bend, a small group of 4 things, and one of them has an awfully long metal weapon, but other than the fact that it's aiming her way, she's not sure what it is. She spots the blue circle tracking towards her, and she jumps as it gets close. There's another flash, and more molten splotches appear where she stood a second ago.
We have to close.
Bronze roars, and the big Oratus begins to jump and claw his way up the mountain. For once, she agrees with Bronze. She pushes with her tail as she jumps, the extra push adding another couple of meters to the move. Her claws scrabbled as she lands, gripping into the hard soil and pulling herself the mountainside towards the foursome. She hears Gray behind her skittering on the rock. It hits her that this is first time she's actually hunting. Chasing after prey, and even if these things are deadly, there's no doubt in her mind that they are just that. Prey. A thrilling flurry flickers through her muscles. She accelerates the climb, keeping her eyes locked on the target, the one holding a long weapon, the one now angling towards her. As she gets closer, out of the shadows she can see its mottled brown and red skin, with scraggly feathers sticking out from its arms and body. One bright green eye looking up from its bulbous head, the spot where its second should be, only a tan-scarred gash. As fast as she's going, though, there's still no cover. The creature has her zeroed. A rock flies hard and fast and strikes the creature in its right arm. It drops the weapon, its arm hanging limp as the rock bounces back down the mountain. She doesn't hesitate. She'll think either gray or bronze later. No sense in giving her prey a chance to recover. Another quick lunge with her talons, and then she gathers her legs and leaps up towards the outcropping where the foursome waits. As she swings over the top, she keeps moving her tail and bashes the first one back in the cliff wall behind them. The other three creatures look at her. She's alone up here, even though Bronze started further up the mountain. Where is he? She banishes the thought in favor of instinct as the creatures are moving. She presses on to the one that had held the weapon and shoves it to the ground. She sees in its face a sad defiance. She hesitates. She should be sweeping through the prey without a second thought. Yet this one, and the one she's pinning to the rock with her tail, is pitiful. Up close, it's clear these things are sick, weak, and struggling. These are pieces of meat, not creatures worthy of her efforts. The other two, the ones she thought Bronze would handle, are cowering now, sinking back against the cliff wall and holding each other. Gray catches up to her then, and she can see two other rocks in his claws ready to release. He lands in front of the fearful pair, and they, like the one beneath her, make him pause.
What are you?
She says to the one under her talons.
We are the last trial.
The scene speaks in a raspy, dry voice, and then breaks into a broken-hearted laugh. Chapter 9. Inside the rock.
The last trial?
She asks. Bronze and Gray never told her anything about trials. The creature slides one eye towards her claw, the one pinning him to the rocks. She lifts it slightly, adjusts its points to angle right towards the creature's thick throat. No uncertainty as to the consequences of an escape attempt.
We're the last trial.
The creature croaks.
We used to be all over this mountain. Fortifications, squads, and gear all set up to give you monsters what you deserved, to prove that we were better.
Better than who?
Better than you.
The thing replies. Then it laughs again.
You want to see what your quest gets you? Look at us. Every one of you that succeeds sends more of us to lives like this. Every name you earn strips one from us.
She glances at Gray, who's returning the same confused look. No help there. She turns back.
I don't know what you are, but you tried to shoot us. Why?
Because they think you're perfect now, so they've forgotten about us. There's nothing left to do but die slow and take as many of you with us as we can.
She's too far gone into thought, doesn't catch it right away as the creature rolls out from under her claw, plunges towards the rifle. But she's too fast, he's too slow, too weak. She doesn't want to kill, but she can't stop herself. It's an instinctual strike. Her claws make a quick slice, and now there's some red rocks on this mountain. The other three rock back, somehow pressing themselves even deeper into the rock. I don't know. Gray hisses, apparently unconcerned with her casual murder. If we leave them alive, they might come after us. She looks at the trio. They seem about as dangerous as dirt, but she agrees with Gray, so she takes the dead creature's weapon, bends it, breaks it with a creaking crack, splits those halves smaller with her claws, then throws the tiny pieces behind her down the mountain.
Now they are no threat,
she says to Gray.
We can be better than animals.
Gray doesn't object, though he does give one last dead stare back at the three creatures before the two of them begin climbing on the ledge and up the mountain. Bronze is nowhere to be seen. He must have gone straight up, not even waiting a moment for them. When we find him, he's mine to kill, Gray says as they climb.
I won't stop you.
It's still a gentle grade up. Lots of chipped rock, and in shadowed clefts of soil, small plants struggle for light. A trail comes out of the rubble, smooth, crushed rocks more well-trod, and it leads to an opening not far above them. A cave that heads down into the mountain, not up towards the peak.
Should we scale outside?
Gray glances up. The mountainside gets steeper and steeper until they would be straight climbing, depending on their claws and soft enough rock to keep going. I don't see Bronze, which means he went inside. Suppose there's that too. For her part, she'd like to carve a piece of the coward as much as Gray, but she also wants to find out why he left. What's the point of joining up with them only to leave every time they get into a conflict? Pursuing Bronze takes a temporary precedence over the peak, and the two of them step into the cave. It's not all that dark. Small glowing lights are embedded in the walls. They emit a soft yellow that glistens off the smooth insides, which are far too clean and rounded. Nothing natural, She sees more metal as they move, supports built to keep the tunnel up. After spending a couple of nights in the jungle and plains, it feels strange to be back among more artificial things. Yet everything she sees tickles her senses, knowledge on the edge of her mind. She knows these things.
How far away was the second arch?
She asks Gray as they move down the tunnel.
How far did you travel with Bronze?
Far enough for him to make me angry. It wasn't even a whole day. They pushed me out in the night, and after I crashed through the canopy, Bronze found me, told me we had to move.
You went with him?
I didn't know what was going on like you. I knew enough to realize being alone was a risk. That certainly seems to be true.
So when you found me, what were you fighting over? That he killed his protector to get that bracelet?
I wanted to lead, he replies, and there's not a hint of regret in his voice, no shame or chagrin. Thought I'd be better than him, Bronze disagreed.
You nearly killed each other over that.
Gray pauses, there in the tight tunnel, looks over at her. I trusted my instincts. They told me that Bronze would get me killed. He almost has twice. She can't argue with that one. The tunnel broadens and then shifts from circle to square. The dirt stops being, well, dirt and switches over to the sleek steel of an artificial shelter. Immediately in front of them is what looks like a door, but it's been broken ajar with one of the two sides hanging askew. She can see part of a word, scratched and faded, and it says 1.
Those things down below, they said they were the last trial. This could be the first.
If it is, it's not in good shape, Gray says as he ducks beneath the door slab. She follows him inside a single room, no, a ruin. Broken parts of many things cluster together. Slashed white tubing snakes through clusters of broken and smashed debris. Glass, metal, and things she doesn't know litter everywhere. Pools of strange liquids occupy divots in the floor where something large fell. The only light comes from a pair of flickering globes, themselves unstable and hanging off the walls they once called home. Her vents burn as they inhale the fumes, and her eyes water at the same. The only exit she can see through the blur is at the back, a large closed door, the word 2 emblazoned on it in bright yellow.
I think we're not the first ones here.
Gray, though, seems more perturbed. He's inspecting the tubing, brushing aside piles of scrap with his tail. What happened here? She picks up a thing on the ground near the entrance. It's long and thin like the barrel of the weapon used further down the mountain. Jagged edges show where it was cut.
I don't think this trial is working.
If we don't pass the trials, then we don't earn our name. This isn't the deal. He picks up a piece of scrap, throws it at the far door. It clings off, leaves a dent and a scratch, but nothing more.
You still think that's true? That if we make it to the top, we'll get our names? After all this, I think the only thing we'll find is dust.
Gray glances back at her from the refuse. Do you know what my guide, the one who greeted me when I hatched, told me? Obviously she doesn't. He told me that our names are everything. If we don't get them, if we don't earn them, then we are nothing. She hasn't seen Gray this angry since that first fight with Bronze. He turns and whips another chunk of metal at the door. It bounces off, leaving a shiny scar on its surface. The dead moment gives her a chance to reflect. She's done plenty. Killed, saved, seen the stars. Proven herself, at least in her own eyes. That only leads to the bigger question. Who was she? She'll have to answer that one herself.
We can't control what happened here, but we can keep moving. Bronze has to be up ahead somewhere. We can make the peak, name or no name.
She goes by Gray to the door he's been whacking with debris. Unlike the first one, this door seems put together. It's tightly shut, a thick pair of steel walls pressed close together. No sign of a forced opening. If Bronze came through here, then he did it nicely. See anything? Gray still sounds a little miffed, but she thinks he'll come around if she can find a way forward.
Nothing,
She says, inspecting.
It's just the door, shut tight.
Gray ambles up beside her. They both stare, trace the letters 2 with their eyes. She leans in closer, looks at the line where the two slabs bind together. A black coating covers the gap, a seal. She sticks her foreclaw against it, presses. The material gives way with her claws sinking as though sinking into fruit, and she realizes it gives her grip.
Do the opposite of me.
She says and doesn't wait for Gray to acknowledge. She takes both of her foreclaws, digs them in the central seal, then turns to the right, digs her talons into the floor and gets ready to push. Gray stares at her, adopts the opposite stance and sinks his own claws in.
Ready,
She says, staring directly into Gray's face, so close to hers. Of course. As soon as she feels Gray start to pull, she pushes, digs her talons in with all the strength she has, presses her tail back against the edge of the wall beyond the door, pushing even while Gray, in front of her, backs his talons against the ground and pulls hard with his foreclaws, and then he digs his midclaws into the center of the door and pulls with those too. First there's nothing, and she hears a creak and a crack as the seal begins to rip away. It's fast then. The door shoots into its slot alongside the exit. Gray stumbles back, hits the wall, and she flies forward into him, and both of them wind up on the floor in a tangle of scales and claws. But the door's open. After extricating themselves, they move on. What greets them is a long shaft leading up. A cylinder of rock and metal with a long blue glow coming from a distant top. There's no elevator, there's no ladder. Not that they need one. "I'll go first," Gray says, and he leaps up, catches the rock with his claws and talons and begins to ascend. She jumps to the opposite side and clambers up to meet him. Together they begin to scale up the shaft towards the blue light. For the second trial, this isn't hard.
You mean I don't even get a thank you?
For what?
For getting us out of the room.
She's goading him, but Gray's too serious for his own good. He needs to relax. She's afraid he'll fly into one of his rages again, or lose himself in some serious mania. She doesn't believe this is the whole trial, and she'll need Gray cool and calm when the real challenge comes. "We got out of there together, though I suppose you did find the door seal. Thank you." She doesn't bother hiding her teeth when she returns the grin. The climb is long and they can't move fast because sections of the tunnel are made up of those metal plates, which are too hard to dig in while supporting their weight. So they scuttle around, occasionally making small jumps to taller parts of the cylinder to get around them, until gradually they reach a section where the entire shaft is metal. Up above she can see the rock returning, talon and claw holds, too far away to reach, to jump to, alone anyway. "I'll throw you," Gray says even as she says she'll throw him. "No, I have the better grip, you'll go." She's about to protest when she realizes he's right about his position. He's got the most rock, and his 4 claws and 2 talons are biting into it. She's only got her talons, with her mid-claws making what they can of a spiky section of hard brown rock.
"And when I get up there, what will you do?"
"Hope you find a way." There's not an ounce of doubt in his voice. He believes her, just like she realizes she believes him.
"Ready."
He lets go with his 4 claws, crouches on his talons, and waits for her. She jumps, presses off of the rock, and her talons land. Just so in his 4 claws. Then he pushes, sends her flying up. As she goes, she reaches towards the rock, passes the metal band, and strikes. Claws bite in, but as she scrambles up, she feels a sharp yank on her tail. Her claws slide down the rock, gouging up pieces, and she makes a quick glance downward, sees Gray hanging from her tail, careful not to let his own claws dig in too far, though she's feeling those points pierce her scales. "I lost the hold when I pushed you." She looks back towards her 4 claws. They're already numb, hurting. The only thing that's keeping her up is that her claws have lodged themselves in the rock. In a moment, they're going to tear away, which means there's only one option.
"Climb me."
She hisses to Gray. "What?"
"Climb me, I'm going to fall."
Now Gray registers what she wants. He doesn't waste a second. Every one of his claws digs into her as he clambers up her tail, her back, and then over her head, and, standing on her shoulders, he easily grips the rock and pulls himself off of her. 1,000 stings shout, and she feels little cuts from him bleeding down her back, but she's escaped death. She's not going to fall now, especially as Gray offers his tail for her to help pull her up past the metal band. They stay there for a moment, resting on the sides of the tunnel. "I'm sorry."
"Don't. We needed to survive. You can't apologize for that."
Gray nods at her. He understands. There are places for compassion, for apologies. This is not one of them. Once her muscles are stable and the twinges in her 4 claws die away, she gives a slight hiss and Gray takes a signal. They climb to the top of the shaft and the broad blue lamp lighting it, get over a small ledge and then crouch through a tighter tunnel. It leads out to an opening, with the series of steps leading away around the outer bend of the mountain. The daylight's slanted to orange-purple twilight now, and she stops for a moment to breathe in the fresh air, to look out over the plains and the jungle and those 3 black arches in the middle of the vast, tree-filled canyon. Somewhere down there are more mossicks, more flowers and bugs, the leather-winged things. She's so far above them that for the first time she feels a real taste of accomplishment, her first real achievement.
"Beautiful."
Gray beside her doesn't say anything at all. Eventually, they move on. There's no sense in climbing the mountain after dark, even if there is a trail. They don't have to go long. The peak's not far above them, and when they get up there, amid the ridges and the cold wind blowing, there's a simple flat circle of rock. In the middle of it, to neither of their surprise, stands Bronze. Chapter 10. Together. All four of Bronze's claws are crossed in front of his vents as he stares at them. There's no sign of the cowardice, the uncertainty that Bronze so often cast upon his face before. Instead, there's purpose, a rigid poise in his straight-backed stance, his tail pooling around his feet. This is a different Oratus than she knows. It shakes her. Is this a race? Did Bronze beating them here earn his name while both she and Gray failed somehow? She hears a hiss from her left. Gray, who's clearly not following her line of thought. He steps forward, claws out and ready. "Coward," Gray says, more spitting the words than speaking them. "You left us." Bronze doesn't reply except to narrow his eyes towards Gray, ever so slightly. He lets Gray come another 2 steps before he opens his own claws and drops into a wide stance, and the two face off. She knows she should help Gray. It should be 2 against 1. But there's an emptiness here on the peak, a void where she expects a grand parade to be, a shower of success, a name and a new purpose delivered. But there's only the rocks, the wind and the cloudless night descending with starlight. The sheer emptiness of it pulls over her. What's the point in fighting if there's nothing to gain and nothing to lose?
What do you believe?
Bronze says to Gray.
Do you think I left you there? Do you think I guided you all this way just to ditch you in the moment of our triumph?
As Bronze speaks, they circle one another and she stays on the outside, watching. "Seems just like you," Gray replies. "Always quick to take advantage, always quick to remove yourself from danger."
Why?
Bronze shoots back. They complete a full circle, keeping their distance from one another, waiting for their moment. Bronze's words strike her as odd. Why doesn't Bronze attack when he could overpower Gray, especially here in this tight spot where the smaller Oratus has no room to move? Why is Bronze playing word games when he never has before? "Because you're a coward," Gray says. "You've always been. You are no warrior." With that insult, Gray's negotiations are over. Gray feints a sidestep, then lunges forward, closing the gap to Bronze in a microsecond. Yet even that is enough time for Bronze to spin and sweep his tail at mid-height, smashing into Gray. The impact flings Gray off to the side of the circle, where he bashes into rock and bounces back onto the floor. Gray rolls with the impact and gets up on his talons, looking at Bronze and hunting for weakness.
Predictable,
Bronze says. Even his tone is different now. No longer the curious, wondering leader, but a dispassionate teacher.
If you want to claim your name, you'll need to think. You need to do more than be your instinct.
Bronze has his back turned to her. She feels she could try a quick swipe, maybe catch him off guard. But then, what if she succeeds? What if she brings Bronze down? Then she'll never learn what he means. Gray's not interested in waiting. He lunges again, and this time Bronze meets Gray straight up. Their claws link and they push and strain at each other. With their mouths, they dart and snap, narrowly missing each other's necks. Bronze tries to sweep his tail around, but Gray twists his talons away, dodging the tail. So Bronze tries something else. The big Oratus squats, keeping his claws linked with Gray, then leaps into the air. Gray tries to release, his eyes going wide, but he can't extricate himself. Bronze twists in the air, swinging Gray beneath him. Gray lands flat on the ground, Bronze on top of him, pinning her friend's arms and legs against the rock floor. Bronze opens his maw wide. Gray squirms, but there's nowhere to go but to that endless sleep.
Don't.
She hisses suddenly, staring at Bronze's back as the larger Oratus keeps her friend down.
There's no reason to.
When Bronze twists to meet her eyes, it's not the same. He's cold, distant, vicious and uncompromising.
You either earn your name or you don't deserve it.
What are you talking about? You are with us.
Bronze glances at his bracelet.
I am beyond you. I am what you hope to be.
She doesn't understand, but she does know one thing. Once Gray is dead, Bronze will come for her next, and she doesn't want to face him alone. She breaks into a run at the larger Oratus, who turns as she comes, plants a talon on Gray's throat, which leaves Gray's own legs free.
Just like before.
She shouts as she closes. Gray gets the message and she jumps, sweeping her claws towards Bronze's face. The big Oratus is ready for the frontal assault, his claws ready to meet hers. What he's not ready for is Gray's talons as Gray catches her feet and pushes, launching her over Bronze's head. She whips her tail as she spins over Bronze, circling its end to catch Bronze around the neck and pull him with her. She yanks Bronze off of Gray and they both collapse. She's on her back with her claws facing the right direction and her tail pinning Bronze against her. Bronze tries to push with his own tail, but her grip is tight. She could kill him, but she's after something else. Her left claws grab hold of Bronze's left foreclaw, and she digs for the bracelet. It's not like loose clothing. Taking the bracelet off rips Bronze's scales with it, but then it's free. It springs off of Bronze's foreclaw and rolls along the ground. All the knowledge, all the secrets waiting there for her to take. As if the bracelet kept Bronze going, he stops struggling once it's free, instead leaning his head back to look at her and Gray.
Together, I am impressed.
Gray rolls himself back to his feet and is about to launch for Bronze when she frees the larger Oratus and gets between the two males.
Impressed?
She asks before Gray decides to go through her.
Impressed by what?
By you, I did not think it likely.
Bronze says as he leans back against the rocks, massaging his foreclaw where the bracelet once was.
You are together. You formed the bond that is the whole point of this journey.
Now even Gray's confused. What bond? Bronze gives them a side smile, brighter than ever before.
You are a pair.
Chapter 11. Earning her name. A pair? Gray beats her to the asking. What you mean a pair? Gray says. I thought we were three. Bronze is still sitting, and the look he throws Gray is one of soft amusement.
I am your guide and also your judge, assigned to watch and make sure you both grow as you should, to make sure you're ready for the trials, and if you fail, to know why so the next Oratus will be better.
That doesn't explain why you're calling us a pair,
she says, though it does explain a lot of Bronze's actions. Why he has the bracelet, why he left whenever danger approached, why he didn't kill Gray in that first jungle fight.
Being a pair means that the two of you will always work together. You will be inseparable, and will be able to face challenges one of you alone would never pass. But both of you will conquer.
His voice has the slant of ritual to it, a speech given many times before. The trials were broken. We were supposed to earn our way up here, but those creatures said,
Things change. The Vifen, those that you encountered, are lingering remnants. Part of older trials left to wither, as most of their species has done. If you dispatch them, then you have done them a favor. Regardless, you survived. You triumphed.
Gray doesn't look convinced. For her part, she's not sure what's going on. Decides to wait and see because it's clear Bronze isn't done.
Having made it here, you must both name one another. You have earned your first letter.
Letter?
She asks, realizing she's never had to consciously spell before. Bronze points to the bracelet.
Slip on the cash. It will guide you.
She moves over to it, Gray watching. Picks up the bracelet, the cash, and the moment her claws close on it, the bracelet changes. It glows bright green, and tendrils spring out. The cash breaks apart as it encircles her left foreclaw. Then the tendrils reform, close together into a new, perfectly fitting bracelet. With a single flash, the green glow dims, and she's lost. It's like diving from the arch. Only this, a rush of knowledge instead of air. An infinity of terms, places, people, species, and thoughts. It's so much that she almost collapses until she hears Bronze, in the back quiet of reality, telling her to focus, to think of what she wants to find. Names, Oratus letters. There they are. As if she's standing in a vast room surrounded by words, only not just text, which she's never read before, but whole ideas. Gray, rendered into emotions and surreal images. They shift as she looks around, and gradually the ideas compress into individual letters, large ones hanging in the gray infinite around her. She tries to point at one, though she has no claws, no form. Yet the cash registers, and the letter floats down in front of her. S. The sound of it wisps through her mind, and it's followed by impressions, images, and definitions. An Oratus that bears this letter is strong, fast, yes, but also aggressive and perilous. A force to be reckoned with and to watch. A perfect fit for Gray. So perfect that she wonders if the cash, in fact, took what she knows about her fellow Oratus and guided her to this choice. The reasons, though, do not matter if the decision is the right one. She speaks the letter aloud to Gray, who only looks confused. Bronze, though, accepts this, asks her to remove the cash. She doesn't want to, but at the same time she's afraid she'll drown if she keeps it on. So with her right foreclaw, she begins to tug at the bracelet, which dissolves into a thin wire frame eager to find a new target to wrap around. The cash slides off and she hands it over to Gray, who slips it on just like she did. She watches his eyes. They, like hers must have, grow wide as the cash connects, as he dives into the endless pool. B, Gray says after some time in silence. Bronze nods again.
Fitting choices.
Now what? Gray, S says.
Now?
Bronze points up and she notices a quartet of bright white lights descending from the night sky.
Now you wait for what comes next. Welcome to your lives, Oratus. Welcome to the galaxy.
This is the end of Oratus, a Skyward Saga short story. Continue the adventure with Starshot, Book 1 in the Skyward Saga series, or find more adventures at blackkey.books.com. Thanks for listening.